In 180 BC, the cycle of carnage that had haunted the empire since the death of the first emperor finally reached its violent conclusion. As Chang'an stirred in the blood-tinted dawn, the generals who had triumphed in the latest coup made an unexpected choice. They turned to the low-profile Liu Heng, the king of Dai and fourth son of Liu Bang, to ascend the throne. He would become known to history as Emperor Wen of Han. We will dedicate a series of episodes to a comprehensive analysis of this sovereign. He was not merely hailed as the finest monarch since the golden age of the three dynasties, but more importantly, he was the architect who reconfigured the very fabric of China's imperial power. His pioneering and visionary reforms established the trajectory of Chinese imperial rule for the next 2 millennia. His political philosophy, strategic military decisions, and even his personal emotions and family affairs serve as a supreme masterclass in the lexicon of Chinese emperors. For generations, political scientists and historians have regarded him as the teacher of 100 emperors, the ultimate archetype of the ideal ruler. Today, we begin our study with his political mastery. How an obscure prince managed to pen the final chapter of 30 years of blood-soaked political history. When messengers from Chancellor Chen Ping and Grand Commandant Chu Bo arrived in the Kingdom of Dai to offer him the throne, a fierce debate erupted within the king's household. This clash reflected the profound distrust that regional powers felt toward the volatile central authority in Chang'an. The conservative ministers, haunted by Empress Lu's decade-long purge of the imperial clan, were consumed by suspicion. They argued that the Han founding officials, mostly fierce generals from the era of the High Ancestor, had shown extreme brutality during the recent purge of the Liu clan. They feared this ascension was likely a lethal trap designed to lure the king to his execution. In the political logic of the early Han, this fear was entirely rational. In an era devoid of institutionalized succession, any cross-regional transfer of power was a journey through a minefield. However, Song Chang, the Commandant of Justice, offered a vastly different strategic perspective. Through a deep analysis of the House of Liu's legitimacy, he asserted that after the fall of the Liu clan, the empire craved stability. He argued that the meritocratic generals, to maintain their own rule, had no choice but to find a legitimate prince. Liu Heng, as the eldest surviving son of the High Ancestor, was the inevitable choice of a balanced power dynamic. Upon hearing both sides, Liu Heng did not succumb to blind optimism. Instead, he initiated a complex, multi-layered verification process. First, he sought divine sanction through pyromancy. The cracks on the tortoise shell revealed the great horizontal Da Heng omen, signaling his destiny as the son of heaven. Next, he dispatched his maternal uncle Bo Zhao to Chang'an to conduct private negotiations with Chu Bo, using the bonds of kinship to gauge the general's true sincerity. Only after repeated confirmations did Liu Heng finally begin his journey. Even on the road from Dai to Chang'an, Liu Heng remained on high alert. When he reached Zhao, a mere 30 li from the capital, he halted again and sent Song Chang ahead to observe the movements within the city. This step-by-step strategy was a psychological test. He needed the ministers in Chang'an to realize that their future emperor was a man of extreme rationality and impenetrable depth. The meeting at Wei Bridge was the most critical political moment before his coronation. As Zhao Bo, Chen Ping, and other officials knelt to welcome him, Zhao Bo attempted to replay the script of the Kingmaker, requesting a private audience with the king. In that context, Zhao Bo's request was not just a bid for credit. It was an attempt to establish a personal, informal patronage that would allow him to maintain his grip on military and political power in the new administration. At this moment, Song Chang's intervention was a stroke of political art. If what you have to say is public, speak it publicly. If what you have to say is private, a king has no private affairs. Through Song Chang's mouth and Liu Heng's silent approval, the possibility of a private alliance between the general and the future emperor was instantly severed. It established a supreme principle in a public forum. Imperial power is public and sovereign. It does not accept private political spoils. Met with this iron fist in a velvet glove, Zhao Bo could only kneel and present the imperial seal, the ultimate symbol of sovereignty. Liu Heng's reaction was even more sophisticated. He refused to accept the seal in the wilderness, insisting on deferring the matter until reaching the formal residence. By moving this momentous transfer of power into a formal political space, he transformed his ascension from being installed by generals to a legitimate succession, completing the legal leap of his reign. Caution was not a sign of retreat, but a preparation for a lightning strike once legitimacy was secured. Liu Heng's first night in the Weiyang Palace remains a classic case study in the peaceful seizure of imperial power. He understood that without absolute control of the sword, the title of emperor was merely a scrap of paper in the hands of the meritocratic generals. Far from being intoxicated by his coronation, he acted with startling decisiveness, reorganizing the capital's armed forces within hours. According to the Book of Han and the records of the Grand Historian, on the very night of his ascension, Liu Heng issued 3 core appointments that fundamentally shifted the power structure of the early Han. Appointing Song Chang as Guard General. As the king's most trusted confidant, Song Chang was placed in direct command of the southern and northern armies, the heart of Chang'an's defense, which had previously been controlled by Zhu Bo and his faction. This was a Blitzkrieg that stripped the meritocratic generals of their substantive military power in the capital. Appointing trusted aides as ministers of the household, Lang Zhongling. This office controlled the palace guards, the emperor's final line of personal safety. By handing this to his loyalists from Dai, Liu Heng withdrew his physical security from the protection of the generals, establishing an independent security apparatus. Universal amnesty and the granting of titles. While reorganizing the top tier of power, Liu Heng quickly issued an edict of general amnesty, granting titles to the common people and providing beef and wine to households. This was not merely an act of benevolence, it was a highly targeted social mobilization. By bestowing grace directly upon the populace, bypassing the bureaucracy, he rapidly built a base of legitimacy and used public sentiment to exert invisible pressure on the meritocratic elite. Another political show followed. In his edicts, Emperor Wen attributed the credit for destroying the Liu clan entirely to the generals, ministers, marquises, and the imperial clan. This superficial humility was a sophisticated political anesthetic. While he praised the generals verbally, he was institutionally eroding their power. By framing their relationship as one of rewarding merit rather than sharing the world, he laid the psychological groundwork for the administrative sidelining that would follow. Note the choice of words: weakening, not suppressing, and certainly not purging. Emperor Wen used masterful political maneuvers to solve the dilemma of the overmighty meritocratic generals that had plagued the early Han, achieving a soft landing for the redistribution of power. In a sense, this was an act of mercy toward the military elite. His methods were exceptionally subtle, often wrapped in the sugar-coated shell of respect and concern, causing his opponents to lose their political footing without realizing it. First, he humiliated the meritocratic generals through their lack of administrative expertise, seizing the psychological high ground. Zhao Bo, the leader of the military faction, based his prestige on battlefield glory, but was utterly deficient in civil administration. Emperor Wen sensed this weakness. During a court session, the emperor suddenly asked Zhao Bo, then the Right Chancellor, two specific questions. How many legal judgments are processed in the empire in a year? And what is the annual fiscal balance of the empire? Faced with these granular statistics, Zhao Bo broke into a cold sweat, unable to answer. The left chancellor, Chen Ping, cleverly responded that such matters were the responsibility of professional officials like the Commandant of Justice and the Minister of Grain. This dialogue was symbolic. It was an intellectual strike that proved the old guard, led by Zhao Bo, could no longer meet the demands of an empire transitioning from governing on horseback to governing through civil order. Following this blow to his prestige, Zhao Bo was pressured by this professionalization to resign. Next was the seigneur's return to fiefs policy, which physically isolated the elite from the center of power. Emperor Wen's most lethal policy was requiring the marquises to reside in their own domains. Since the founding of the Han, many meritocratic officials had held fiefs but stayed in Chang'an to control central power. Emperor Wen repeatedly issued edicts ordering them to leave the capital, framing it as a way to reduce the burden on the local populace and allow the nobles to govern their own lands. This policy was logically irrefutable, as it aligned with the legal principles of the feudal system. In practice, however, it meant physically severing the elites from their power networks in Chang'an. When a heavyweight official like Zhao Bo was forced to leave the capital for Jiang County, he lost his influence over central decision-making. Throughout this process, Emperor Wen remained warm and generous, granting Zhao Bo 5,000 catties of gold and 10,000 households, a buyout policy that reduced the intensity of the struggle and ensured a smooth transition of power. Finally, through a masterful political performance, he demonstrated his power over life and death, completing their final domestication. Even after Zhao Bo returned to his fief, the emperor did not truly rest. Shortly after, Zhao Bo was accused of treason and imprisoned, where he was humiliated by jailers. Although he was eventually released through the intervention of Empress Dowager Bo and suffered no permanent destruction, the political significance of the case far outweighed the judicial one. It sent a clear signal to the meritocratic class. The emperor could use the legal system to strip anyone of their life and wealth at any time. Following this ordeal, Zhao Bo was thoroughly tamed, never again daring to show a hint of ambition. By alternating the stick and the carrot, Emperor Wen maintained the stability of the regime while completely dissolving the autonomy of the meritocratic military class, making them entirely dependent on the sovereign power. The stability of the Han Empire was threatened by more than just the meritorious generals. Since the high ancestor Liu Bang began suppressing the non-kin kings, the power of the imperial clansmen, the Liu family princes, had been steadily rising. Possessing legitimate succession rights and formidable regional armies, they were the most direct competitors to the throne. Emperor Wen's strategy here revealed the sophisticated wisdom of what would later evolve into the decree of extended grace. His first move was the gentle fragmentation of the Qi lineage, a problem that required immediate resolution. The descendants of Liu Fei, king of Daihui of Qi, had been highly active during the Liu clan purge. King Ai of Qi and his brothers Liu Jiang and Liu Xingju had once been the strongest rivals to Emperor Wen's ascension. Upon taking the throne, Emperor Wen employed a masterfully seasoned tactic of divide and rule. He began by returning lands that had been forcibly seized during Empress Liu's reign, a public display of familial benevolence. However, he subsequently exploited internal succession crises and rebellions to perform a precision dissection of the kingdom. When Liu Xingju, the king of Jibei, rebelled in the third year of Emperor Wen's reign, the emperor swiftly mobilized the Grand Army to crush the revolt. Yet, instead of a mass political purge, he partitioned the once unified territory of Qi into 7 distinct entities, enfeoffing the various sons of the original Qi lineage. This principle, the proliferation of vassals to dilute their might, nominally expanded the family's reach of imperial grace, but in reality, it diluted a powerful military and political entity into several competing, weakened micro-states. Emperor Wen maintained the moral high ground throughout, leaving the fragmented clansmen unable to resist. Instead, they were forced to show gratitude for his generosity. This structural dismantling was far more enduring than mere military conquest. Next, Emperor Wen turned his attention to his own younger brother, Liu Bang's other surviving son, Liu Chang, the king of Huainan. If the treatment of the Qi lineage was a gentle fragmentation, the disposal of Liu Chang embodied Emperor Wen's cold political patience. As one of the High Ancestors' last surviving sons, Liu Chang was arrogant and defiant, frequently violating Han law and even extrajudicially killing the Marquis of Piang in the capital. Emperor Wen did not punish him immediately. Instead, he adopted a dangerous strategy of fatal indulgence. He publicly praised Liu Chang's spirited nature and repeatedly waived legal responsibility for his illegal acts. Historians view this as a classic entrapment strategy. Through bottomless tolerance, he lured Liu Chang into a delusion of absolute power, which eventually led the king to conspire with the Xiongnu in a rebellion. Once the treason was established, Emperor Wen performed a display of extreme reluctance. He rejected his ministers' calls for execution, instead stripping Liu Chang of his rank and exiling him to the remote Shu region. However, in the execution of the exile, he subtly signaled to the officials along the route not to unseal the carriage to provide food. This resulted in Liu Chang's miserable death by starvation. Afterward, Emperor Wen mourned him with great fanfare, executed the officials who had failed to care for the king, and provided a lavish burial. This act, eliminating the rival while harvesting the reputation, not only purged a contender for the throne, but also left the facade of a benevolent elder brother, elevating political performance to the level of high art. The most enigmatic and profound act of Emperor Wen's career was the execution of his own maternal uncle, Bo Zhao. Bo Zhao was not only the sole brother of the Empress Dowager, but also the primary official responsible for Emperor Wen's safe ascension. Through the death of Bo Zhao, one can glimpse Emperor Wen's pursuit of a pure autocracy. In the political logic of the early Han, the consort kin, the Empress's family, were pillars of the throne, but also its greatest threat. The lesson of Empress Lu's autocracy had left Emperor Wen highly vigilant against any form of shared power. As the only member of the Bo clan to hold a marquisate, Bo Zhao's rising prestige in court eventually kindled the emperor's suspicion. The direct cause of Bo Zhao's downfall varies in historical records. Some say he murdered an imperial messenger. Others suggest he killed a high-ranking official during a heated game of Liu Bo chess. Regardless of the details, the core logic remained. Bo Zhao's actions constituted a public defiance of imperial authority. In the process of executing his uncle, Emperor Wen did not use the standard penal system. Instead, he invented a political ritual of extreme psychological impact. He first sent ministers to proclaim Bo Zhao's guilt, pressuring him to commit suicide on moral and legal grounds. When Bo Zhao refused, Emperor Wen ordered the high officials of the court to dress in funeral shrouds and go to Bo Zhao's house to wail day and night. This scene, the officials in mourning garments weeping at his gate, was in effect an extreme moral trial. It announced to the empire that, due to his crimes, the emperor had already deemed him a dead man in spirit, and the entire bureaucracy was merely completing the prophecy through mourning. The immense social pressure eventually drove Bo Zhao to take his own life in a state of mental collapse. Through this, Emperor Wen drew a clear line for the Empress Dowager and all future consort kin. In the face of imperial power, the ethics of blood must yield to law and order. This event effectively severed the possibility of consort kin interference in the early Western Han, providing a clean political core for the rule of Wen and Jing. As these examples illustrate, Emperor Wen's greatest contribution to Chinese history was his termination of the bloody political normalcy that had defined the first 20 years of the Han. Before his era, transitions of power were almost always accompanied by the extermination of entire clans and civil war. Through his masterful political performances, Emperor Wen diverted political struggle into administrative and ritualistic channels. Every one of his suppressive moves was cloaked in the appearance of justice. The grief he showed when executing Bo Zhao, the favor he showed when dismissing Chu Bo, and the generosity he showed while dismantling Qi were all components of a gentle power illusion. This illusion significantly lowered his opponent's will to resist. When a man of Chu Bo's stature could retire safely to his hometown with a massive fortune, he lost the desperate motivation to launch a military coup. Through 23 years of rule, Emperor Wen reunified the fractured Han imperial power. What he left for his descendants was no longer a fragile throne that required constant vigilance against founding generals, but a centralized state with an efficient administration, controlled regional powers, and relatively stable social conditions. This consolidation was not achieved overnight. It was quietly completed in every court audience, every edict issued, and every fiscal allocation. He successfully fashioned himself as an emperor who did not love power, and it was precisely this posture that allowed him to wield the most absolute authority. Looking back at the political career of Liu Heng, the so-called low profile and filial piety were not just his personality traits, they were his sharpest political weapons. He used these traits as a screen to conduct a 20-year political purge within the depths of the Wei-Yang Palace. He became the archetype for 1,000 years of emperors, not because he lacked ambition, but because he was able to wrap that ambition in a respect for civilization, order, and morality. He taught future sovereigns a profound lesson. True power does not need to be proven through constant slaughter. It is achieved through the domestication of systems, psychological maneuvering, and flawless political performance. The moment Emperor Wen refused Zhao Bo's private words on the Wei Bridge, he had already signaled the end of the era of the meritocratic generals. With an air of absolute composure, he dismantled the arms of his comrades through conversation, disposed of rebellious kin through tears, and established an unchallengeable imperial power through humility. This supreme level of political maturity transformed him from a marginal prince of Dai into the most insurmountable peak in the history of Chinese autocracy. His political handiwork not only ended the chaos of the early Han, but also set the tone for 2,000 years of temperate, centralized power in China.